So we're going to describe the skill will matrix here. As you can see in the card, it says that every leader should have a plan for each and every person that reports to them. So what we want to avoid is this idea that you have a leadership style, this is the way you do things, and you treat every single person that you lead in the same way, because that is very unlikely to gain results from the majority of them who may benefit from a different approach. So just to describe the model itself, firstly, you can see we have an X and a Y axis. On the X axis is the level of skill. So starting from a low level of skill, of course, going up and getting to, an expert level of skill. That's the x-axis. The y-axis then has a level of will or motivation. So from low level of motivation, moving up to a very high level of motivation. And we divide it into 4 quadrants. So let's look at the first quadrant, the bottom left. They have a low level of skill, and they also have a low level of will or motivation. So this could well be, for example, a new hire. This could be somebody that's never done this task before, somebody that firstly doesn't have the skill level, has never experienced it, hasn't built up the knowledge, but also maybe doesn't feel that confident going into it. So as you can see, what you need to do is you need to lead in a direct manner and you need to supervise. So you need to be instructive. You need to tell them what to do. And you also need to make sure you're observing and watching them to make sure that that task is being completed correctly. Joanna.
Yeah, and the challenge here is when working with experienced professionals, sometimes you will see a lot of resistance to change as they have been doing things in a particular way for a long time.
I've got a friend who's a vet, and he has a young vet who's still at Vets University, and she insists that she can do everything, and she can't. And my friend Andy is very frustrated because there are standard procedures which he needs to happen in a certain way. So he's struggling to confront her with the fact that she can't do these things to the correct level of quality that she needs to. And she's very frustrated because for her, this is like 101. And she's an intelligent person, brain box banana, 5 years of university skills. But in this case, she's in that area where she requires direction and supervision. She's not willing to receive it because her own self-perception of the world is different.
Great. So we'll move then to the upper left quadrant. As you can see, the level of skill is still low, but the level of will, motivation, is very high. So this is also likely somebody maybe new into a role, or new into the company, new in their career. So they're motivated. They really want to get to grips with things. Maybe this is their passion. Maybe this is something they've been studying and they want to now apply it to the real world. So the will is really high here. But the level of skill is still low because they've maybe never done it before, or their experience is very limited. So as a leader, what you need to be doing, you need to be coaching and guiding them. So it's not as direct as the bottom left section. You're not being quite so instructive and maybe direct and strict, but you're still kind of there, and you as a leader, you're very much taking them through this process along the way. So Joanna, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, on this side of the quadrant, I think this is the best place to use questions and coaching. So if you think about it, question asking can be used anywhere, really, but coaching questions will be used better where the motivation is higher. So we are at the top side of the model right now when we think about coaching.
And certainly in various forms of research done with coaching, mentoring programs, younger receivers of coaching methodologies achieve the best aha effects in terms of, oh, wow, I learned something new. I generated this idea for myself. And they were brought to that point by their leads asking series of questions. The older you get, the less euphoric and less, rocket science that result is. However, the fact that you're still growing in the skill curve is still there for young and old, and therefore the question asking process is still there as well. I have a friend called Danny, we'll call him, and his nickname is Mr. Motivation. He's 85 years old. He's the most motivated person on the planet, and he loves being coached. He loves it. And he's so open and interested and motivated to learn. And he knows that he doesn't have the knowledge himself. So he's a really incredible example of somebody who can lose his cool. He can drop all of his ego stuff and simply, respond very well to somebody asking him how he would do something in a given situation, because he knows that he's learning something new while he's doing it. A rare occurrence.
Great. So we've discussed the two on the left-hand side of the model. So moving over to the right-hand side and the top right quadrant. So as you can see now, the level of skill is now high, and the level of will has remained high. So this is really, we could say, the ideal, the maybe the best quadrant that you could hope for somebody to be in. The level of skill is high, so they must have experience. It's very unlikely somebody's going to come in on day one of the job and have a high skill and high will. This is likely somebody that's built into this role, that's studied, that's gained their knowledge, that's been in the company for some time, but the level of will and motivation has remained very, very high. So what do you do with this person? You delegate and you empower. So you're really kind of handing over to them, effectively the opposite of that bottom left quadrant. Rather than being direct and supervising, you're handing responsibility to them. You're giving them your trust, you're giving them your faith, and you're really giving them something to get their claws into. Joanna.
So when we talk about delegating tasks, what we want to do is not just give other people things that we don't want to do, but delegating tasks that are intended for challenge and development, because you should always delegate things that are beneficial for the person. And something that I would also add here, besides delegating and empowering, is celebrating. So for someone who is highly skilled and highly willed, celebrating is an important part of the journey.
And there's one guaranteed way to celebrate the work that somebody else does. Give them your favorite stuff. So, give them the stuff that you love the best and delegate that. And then you're going to be really interested in the result, especially when it's good, and the celebration will follow as a natural result. Remember, Mike, you were asking earlier about that person with low skill and low will, but they've just come into the organization, which means wouldn't they be motivated and have a lot of willingness? This is exemplified quite well here, because as a general level of motivation, somebody who's new to the organization will be very, very motivated to be there in a new place. But if you give somebody a piano and they can't play the piano, and you say, play the piano, they're going to be worried, right? You play the piano, get a non-piano player, put them in front of a piano, ask them to play the piano, and they're going to be, I don't know how to do this. The will level is low, which means there's a level of learning and a level of experience that needs to go in there before that can be built up. And this area of high will and high skill, so, when you get here, this is like, I'm at the top of my powers when it comes to this particular topic. And if I can have stuff delegated and empowered to me, which really gives me the opportunity to exercise everything that I know there, I'm going to be very, very, very motivated, and be able to do that really well.
So moving into the fourth and final quadrant, which is the bottom left. So as you can see, the skill level is still very high, but the level of will is low. It's either dropped or it was never high, but the level of will here is low. So the level of motivation is low. Kind of stereotypical character that we're talking about here is maybe somebody that is very well established and well experienced in the company. Maybe they've been doing the same job in the same way for 15 or 20 years. And the challenge can really come when, if there's a change or if there's a suggestion or a new way of potentially doing things, you're also coming up against this resistance to change that we mentioned earlier. So what do you need to do with this type of character? Well, you engage and excite them. You've got to try and increase that level of motivation.
I think it involves a more cooperative type of leadership. And when you are the leader of this type of person, you need to be very honest to yourself of what their desire is in terms of their position and their involvement in the company. And sharing responsibility could be the key here, along with honest conversations of where do they want to be and where do they want to go. You could also include coaching conversations, but you have to be very careful with not falling into the patronizing area.
I think this is a really important point. What is very often is, if you're a manager and you have one of these characters in your team, there's a good chance this person has a higher skill level than you because they've been an SME, a subject matter expert on this topic for potentially decades. So you have to avoid that, patronizing approach. You can't treat them like somebody who's new to the company. So you really got to be honest and have that discussion with them. Now, Tim, I have a quick question for you because there's something I want to clarify in this model, because in the top right-hand quadrant, so high skill, high will, we have delegate and empower. In the bottom right quadrant, high skill, low will, we have engage and excite. But one of the key ways in which we engage and excite people is by delegating and empowering, is by giving them a new challenge, a new task, something they can really get their teeth into. So what I'm trying to understand, Tim, is the kind of differentiation between these two quadrants. If you could maybe shed some light on that for us.
Let's take an example of a project manager who has been at the top of their game for 5 years, and you've been delegating and empowering one project after the next, after the next, after the next, and it's grown in terms of level of importance and visibility over 3 years. And then for 2 years, it's kind of reached a pinnacle. And this person has just been, leading the pack when it comes to great project management capability in the company. Yeah. Now they've been there, seen it and done it. Yeah. And you give them another project, bigger, more important. They're just looking at it and they're saying another one. And the level of motivation starts to drop, which means delegating and empowering is no longer working. So what is going to work? Yeah. It's like, and I think in so many cases, this is really where leadership is, your own quality of leadership is really put to the test, because so many times I've spoken to extremely good people and said, what do you want? And they said, well, I want to be a part of the change. I want leadership to change. I want the organization to move in a better, a more focused, a different direction. And I'm not seeing that happen. The bad habits of the past have never changed into the good habits of the future. And that's what I want to happen. Yeah. And if that could happen, then I may be able to, find my mojo again, find my motivation, find my thing again. And, but I think it's, different for every different person, but especially difficult for those people who, are so good that they've lost the desire to move forward. And you see this very often when you have companies that are just changing year after year. And people don't see themselves and see their importance and value to the organization in the same way that they did when they were at the top of that curve with high motivation and high skill.